Hey, haven't done one of these in a while. A lot of you wanted to know what I thought about the new Castlevania Netflix series. Series is a bit of a stretch. The first season's only 4 episodes long, and they're all around.
Series of 4 episodes.
Yeah, around half an hour a piece. It's more like it's like a movie they was cut into 4 pieces. Anyway, I'm ready for a discussion, but I hate doing this type of shit myself, so I brought a guest, the man responsible for getting me into the Castlevania franchise, among many, many other games. It's my Uncle Greg. Hey, Uncle. Hey, thanks for joining me. I appreciate your company.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Hi there, everybody.
Where to begin? The Castlevania Netflix series. This was. I mean, do we start with the 2009 film that kind of went nowhere?
I tell you what, let's jump over it the same way the studios did. let's just bypass that one as as fast as we can, like a road through a nature preserve. Let's just go around it.
Yeah, because I mean, the idea of a Castlevania film, like animated or otherwise, has been in the cards for God knows how long. I think there was at least a movie poster made years ago, and that was the last we ever heard of it. That was that, and it just kind of fell off into nothingness.
Which could easily have just been a fan-made, something that anybody did, but, it turned out there was more behind it than anybody had anticipated.
And for a while, nothing came of it. And then I remember if it was last year or something of the sort that a Castlevania series was announced for Netflix. And I remember thinking it was a hoax at first because I remember when do you remember The Legend of Zelda?
The Legend of Zelda had one, and was that actually a hoax, or was that something that was going through and then stopped, or is that something that's still being worked on?
It was confirmed a fake.
Okay.
Nintendo denied anything that was happening. It was just something that was just passing through the rumor mill, as things on the internet are wont to do.
It's a good thing that they denied it, so now we'll get one next year from them. They'll
maybe a mobile phone game.
Legend of Zelda show on Netflix. Original idea. Don't steal.
Yeah, please, for the love of God. I need some money. Please, Breath of the Wild. When the Netflix show was announced, I thought, because at this point, I thought Castlevania was all but dead.
Pretty much.
The last new game, as we're talking about from the original series, was Order of Ecclesia. That was in 2008 for the Nintendo DS.
Excellent game, by the way.
Yeah, excellent game. Go play it. Go play the entire franchise while you're at it.
Yeah, skip the 64 games.
Yeah, and the pachinko stuff. There was Castlevania: The Adventure Rebirth on the Wii, but that was a remake of a Game Boy game.
Yeah,
and the less we speak about Judgment, the better.
Well, the Lords of Shadows games. Well, the first Lords of Shadows.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to skim over Lords of Shadow, even though I totally did, because I don't really not a fan of those games. I know, but that was it. That wasn't exactly a traditional Castlevania, if you know what I'm getting at. And after the whole stint with Hideo Kojima and Konami falling off the deep end, pachinko machines galore, Castlevania among a lot of other classic Konami franchises, I'm talking Contra, Gradius. It was very odd to hear that the Castlevania series was getting revitalized in some sense via a Netflix series. I mean, I'm not against the model. There are a lot of great things about Netflix. I love Daredevil. I love Breaking Bad, so I binge watch the damn show.
It's a great platform for bringing back things that networks maybe don't deem viable enough, and Netflix is good for. We get 10 episodes, 10, 12 episodes, which is, I'm an anime fan, and that those are my favorite series of anime, where they keep it very limited. So Netflix is very good for that. It was a little weird, even from someone like Netflix, to say, hey, out of nowhere, here's a Castlevania show. I'll be honest, it's ironic because it's probably as sudden as Castlevania rising from the ground every 100 years.
It's like they got a big ass tombstone with Netflix on it, and then lightning just strikes the tombstone.
Yeah, like we every time we come into a Castlevania game, at least in the old ones, that was the premise that Castlevania has risen from the depths, and we need to summon a Belmont to fight it. And you think, holy hell, Castlevania has risen from the depths on Netflix, of all places.
This media is a creature of chaos.
Yeah,
it may take many incarnations.
It may take many incarnations. That's the internet's motto.
Yeah. Well, the incarnation in this case is a animated series. I remember the teaser for the show where someone was plugging in an SNES cartridge and they're booting up the TV, and then slowly transferred into an animator. It's like, okay, first off, someone never played an NES because NES can't do all this shit.
Come on now, episode 0 is blowing into the cartridge and you know it.
Yeah, hitting the reset button to the graphics look great.
Yeah,
a cartoon series, and I was down with the idea.
Hold on a second. An anime series. Let's not piss anybody off.
Okay, anime-esque. Because look, to me, for me to classify it as anime, it needs to be made in Japan. Anywhere else, it's anime-esque.
I guess so. Well, what is that? That's the rule with champagne. Isn't it like it's champagne if it's made in a specific place? Anywhere else, it's called sparkling white wine. Google that to prove me right or wrong. I don't know.
So the cartoon itself. I mean, we got all the introductions out of the way. I mean, what did you think about it at a glance? I mean, okay. Well, first, before we even do this, spoilers. I mean, if it's not obvious enough, we're going to be spoiling the hell out of this. So if you haven't watched it, go do that first.
It's 4 episodes. They blaze by really fast. If you plan on sitting here listening to this, then plan on watching the show first.
Yeah.
You know, if you can only do one or the other, watch the show first. And then come back here and love us or hate us for whatever we're going to say.
Foreboding.
Let's because we're about to put our opinions on the internet, and we might as well be starting a fire.
Leaving the likes and dislikes untouched and the comment section open.
And remember, if you really, really hate what we say, click dislike twice.
First impressions. I mean, what did you think about the series as early as like the first episode? I mean,
I don't think we should take it episode by episode, or that we probably will, because each episode was kind of distinct from each other.
Right.
But first scene, I absolutely loved just the style of everything. One of the things that got me, one of the first times we were really introduced to this love affair between Dracula and Lisa was Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which we didn't really get a lot of backstory for it.
I'm surprised the series started with that. I mean, if we're going to start like a plot synopsis without going too deep into it, the series takes place around Castlevania 3's timeline, Dracula's Curse.
I guess you would say just before Castlevania 3 started. Technically right before it. Because when Castlevania 3 starts, we're just Trevor and we meet Sypha and all these characters along the way.
Right.
So it would technically be right before it. But the show opens with the beginning romance between Dracula and Lisa, who we saw in Symphony of the Night, not Castlevania 3. I remembered always wondering in Symphony, how did these two get together?
Yeah, at what point in Dracula's life did he settle down to find a human mistress?
What even was his situation where he would come across a human that would live long enough to gain his attention? So I loved that the show started there. It gave me a piece of story that I've always wanted.
Granted, the Castlevania series is never really that deep in chronology for a couple of things, and there are a few things in this show that I found enlightening when you take it into consideration. Because again, the biggest question was, when at one point or another did Dracula want a human wife? And I thought he hated humans and all that sort of thing. But then then they go and elaborate. There's like, no, he never really despised humans. He just hated God.
Exactly.
For what he felt he did to him to make him what he was and everything he's taken away from him. He just hated God specifically. Didn't really give a shit about humans.
Yeah, if anything, he was indifferent towards them. You know, as long, they left him alone, he left them alone. Like that seemed to be the way it worked. And that was very interesting to me. It humanized this ultimate evil character. So I like that. I like that we started somewhere where we kind of we could at least understand how he got to this point. Because, it never kind of made sense to me in Symphony that I hate humanity, but my human wife is dead. Like, okay, well, somewhere along the line, you didn't have too much of a problem with them.
Yeah, I mean, does Dracula succumb to hormones as bad as a human does?
See, now I'm imagining like a pimply-faced 16-year-old Dracula, where his parents won't let him out of the coffin. Go to your coffin.
It's like the fucking Alucard in Captain N, the Game Master, who was like a punk with the skateboard and the backwards hat and the sunglasses.
Oh, God.
It's Dracula, the origin story. We're unaware the entire time. But that's what the story begins. And, I mean, everyone that's played Symphony of the Night knows where this is eventually going to turn out. And I'm glad they were true to the story that was introduced in Symphony of the Night, because Lisa was eventually burned at the stake and all that sort of thing. And Dracula just kind of lost his mind. But he was humane enough to give Wallachia a year's time to get the hell out.
Well, technically, no. Technically, no. Because you saw, after he stopped talking to them, he was upset because the spell that he wanted to cast was going to take a year.
That's right.
So he played it off
as he is like, I'm a very gracious vampire.
I'm gracious. I'll give you a year. I don't have a choice anyway, but
but when I do
it, you kids are gonna pay.
Yeah.
And your dog.
And then afterwards, we jump to a year later, and that's where the plot really kicks off. And I mean, it's really hard to put into words, I suppose, like my overall feelings of the series. Okay, just to generalize, I thought the series was good, not exactly great.
As far as story reasons go, I didn't actually have too much of a problem with the story structure at this point. It's only 4 episodes, but it is the first 4 episodes. It's not like we're getting these 4 episodes with the idea that this is it. So we know that we're going to go much further and deeper than this. And I thought that this was a good story. Episode 1 introduced us to why Dracula is doing all of this. Episode 2 turns into more of a Trevor story. 3 turned into the Trevor and Sypha and all of that stuff. And then 4 turned into the Alucard story. I thought structurally that was great. There were the technical stuff, we'll definitely get into. Other than that, I thought it was a nice introduction to the characters, which is important to me.
I just think at points it felt really obvious that this was clearly a 2-hour movie they cut into 4 episodes. I know at the end of the day, it's not really a problem since all 4 episodes are available right from the get-go. It's not like you had to wait a week for all this sort of thing. But it's just oddly segmented. And I felt a little distracting about that. It's like 22 minutes later, and we get a credits, like at the middle of like a thing. No, I want to learn more. I want to jump into the next scene.
You know what it is? It doesn't help that at the end of the 4th episode, it blatantly ended as this is the end of the first act. Like, you know what I mean? With them walking, as a group, like it just immediately was, oh, this was blatantly 4 episodes made to be 4 episodes. Which, again, was actually, an hour and a half, 2 hours
close
cut
to
into pieces.
Over feature length, yeah.
Which I grew up with. I used to watch G.I. Joe, and they used to do the G.I. Joe movie, and then they did the Pyramid of Darkness, which were movies, but then they would cut them into pieces and then show them in the afternoon over the course of a week.
In the case of G.I. Joe or TMNT or Transformers, was season 1 4 episodes long? I mean...
No, season 1 was usually 65 episodes long and jam-packed full of sugary snack commercials.
God bless America. I suppose my biggest problem with the series is that it is only 4 episodes long. And I don't think the source material would be the cause of that because, well, first off, you're making an animated series off of the game in the first place. And Castlevania 3 does have the most lore, in quotes, compared to, like, the early Castlevania games.
You know what? It's the first time we were introduced to real characters.
For the NES games, you mean specifically?
Yeah, because Castlevania 2 had lore. Whether or not people hated the game, there was a lot of lore and storyline there, but there were no characters to interact with other than, NPCs. It was very empty. If we had characters that we interacted with on a more regular basis, it might have felt a little more fleshed out, but we didn't have that. So the show being based then would have just been empty.
Did you know anything about the series writer Warren Ellis before watching the series? Did you even look into any of that before that? The only thing I know of Warren Ellis, because he's primarily a comic book writer. He's wrote the Astonishing X-Men, Thunderbolts, Moon Knight. He wrote the Extremis story arc of Iron Man. That's the only thing I know about, because I've actually read the Extremis arc on Iron Man.
Oh, okay.
I love the film series so much. But before, this is actually the first thing I've ever watched, I guess, as a cartoon of the man. And I didn't really see any sort of similar writing styles off the top of my head after the first viewing anyway. I didn't really. If he has a signature writing style, I didn't see it. Then again, I also didn't read much of what he's written throughout his years as a writer, so that's probably why. But I thought it was I thought it was okay. For the show, I thought the show was perfectly fine, writing wise. I thought they got characters for the most part down pat. Well, there was barely any there in the first place. Let's be fair. The only one that ever had any sort of semblance of character because of previous games was Alucard, because of Symphony of the Night. But Trevor, Sypha,
that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that's it.
All of the speakers stuff was introduced in the show.
Yeah, that wasn't in
That's
the
why
original
all of that
game.
speaker stuff, the evil church, like all of that is show based. None of that was really in the game. Yeah, so there's really nothing to compare it to. They may come across as archetypes, but when this game first was out, none of that was there. So, at this point, you're going to get that.
It'd be very interesting if Dracula's Curse actually start with you fighting the church, and I like to see how Nintendo censorship policies will get around that one.
Oh, God, yeah.
I thought the writing for the most part was great, but there was just, again, this is, all right, so getting into the technical things about it, there were some things that did bother me in terms of the story's pacing, and I think episode 2 had it the worst.
Okay.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
You're going to talk about the greatest of all time?
I'm not going to talk about... I guess you're right. You are talking about the greatest of all time. No, we're talking about a literal goat. That bar scene, I think...
Hold on, let me get you there. That was the end of the first episode. The goat conversation was the end of the first episode, and then it led into the second episode, which was the fight.
Either way, it went on too fucking long. That scene in the bar goes on way too long. For what's supposed to be, for all intents and purposes, an introduction to Trevor Belmont, it goes on way too long. And there were a couple of things wrong with it. I thought the animation was pretty hokey throughout, because this series has phenomenal fight choreography. Like, animation-wise, I think it looks magnificent. When it slows down for one-on-one conversations, holy shit. It's like a couple of mannequins trading words together, and the only time they ever move is with their hands or with their head. It's very fucking stiff.
It's funny. I actually I'm on the fight point. I'm actually kind of the other way around.
Really?
I think that when they talked and everything, everybody was a little bit stiff. Which, if you're a fan of animation, that's usually a trick. Where if you have a scene as still for as long as possible, while they're having a conversation, you have to animate less. So it allows you to pump more stuff out. As far as that goes, I'm kind of used to that. I thought that the animation quality was well enough. When you get to different kinds of quality, a lot of the time that can be written off to me as a style choice. Because there's some shows out there that are animated and everything is incredibly super detailed. And then there's some shows where it's a more simplistic style of art. And I don't think one is better than the other. I just think that it is a choice. When the fights picked up, to certain fights specifically the last fight, to me, I felt almost like they were skipping frames of animation that should have been there.
Or looping things quite obviously.
I
remember when there's one particular moment when Trevor and Alucard are trading blows, one with Trevor with his whip and Alucard with his sword, and Trevor is quite clearly doing the same whip animation as he's talking to Sypha. And
with his 92-foot whip.
With his knife. It never can, the whip in its ever-changing size. I mean, that's rule of anime. That's cartoon.
Yeah,
it's cartoon logic.
I'll hold off on any extreme criticism for the exaggerated nature of anime. So I have no problem with that. It's just it's one of those things that it does kind of take you out of it a little bit when he flips his whip and swings across, and then there's a wide out shot, and the whip is clearly 60, 70 feet long. It takes you out of it a little bit because you get invested in it. You start watching it, and you think, oh man, this is so intense. And when the fight scenes start, yes, he's fighting a giant laser beam shooting Cyclops, but you're still kind of invested in the danger of it.
Best part of the series so far for me, I'm not lying, is the Cyclops fight. For what it did to me as a Castlevania fan, because, I mean, I know we had the beginning of the show where Dracula's getting all like Satan Zordon by having his face appear on the bonfire, warning the village that he's going to come back in a year. And also,
townspeople.
Yeah.
Townspeople, your danger is coming 1 year from now.
You better recruit 5 teenagers with attitude. Shitload of fucking demons.
Go, Castlevania.
Yeah. Hey, I'd watch that.
All right. I'd play that.
But when Trevor is going down to the catacombs in search of one of the speaker's missing a grandchild, they keep it vague.
At this point, he doesn't know yet.
Yeah, he doesn't know yet. They keep it vague. And I see the petrified Sypha in the center. I was like, okay, that's right from the game. That's cool. I see the Cyclops. And first thing I noticed, the Cyclops is there. So he's missing his hammer because he had a big-ass hammer in the video game. But he's there, and that laser comes out of his fucking head. And I was like, yes. By doing that, by having a Cyclops with a laser come out of his eyes, they are telling me that they are not afraid to get video gaming up in this bitch. They are because my biggest fear going into this show was that it'd be too Lords of Shadow.
Yeah, that they were going to try and keep it almost like a period piece.
Yeah,
where they want you to believe that this took place in 1467 in a realistic Earth 1467 instead of this fantasy world.
Lords of Shadow was very Lord of the Rings-esque. Which I know it's kind of the words kind of.
Oh, see, I get it. Lord of the Rings, Shadow of Mordor.
It all comes together.
I get it.
We're solving the puzzle.
Okay.
Fucking pay us.
Now, next time we'll get a Shadow of the Ring or something.
But the Castlevania series, since its inception, I would argue since its inception. Well, yeah, since its inception, were clearly inspired by like the Universal Hammer films, where you had the Mummy, you had the Wolfman, and Frankenstein, and as the series,
your classic, your most classic movie monsters,
right?
Your creatures from the Black Lagoon that jump out of the water and these shoot fireballs at you, but later on they made them shoot water at you, which actually was kind of cool.
And as the series transcended consoles and all that sort of thing, it just got more and more ridiculous, which I always found true to its roots, because those films were always so hammy and so cheesy. That's one of the reasons why you like watching it. It's like, yeah, the Cyclops has laser comes out of its eyes.
You know what? It fits the mood because the castle itself changes over time. So it's not supposed to look the same. You're not supposed to walk in and there's only a courtyard and a conservatory. You're supposed to walk in and say, wow, look at all of these clock gears. They don't do a damn thing. But here they all are. There's a scene in the movie Galaxy Quest where the mashers are like, they're trying to crush them back and forth. And they're sitting there thinking, well, who's building this? Like, what is the purpose of this room? And that to me is Castlevania. It is, in fact, the creature of chaos. So it makes sense that the monsters, you could have a Cyclops with a hammer, but he might actually shoot a laser beam out of his eye.
Yeah. For them to actually bring that in for the series tells me that, they are not afraid to get goofy as hell for whatever they want to fight. I mean, which is great because, there are a lot of people I've heard that were put off by the level of violence. This show was gory as hell. We're talking Castlevania Bloodlines level of gore, and it hits you as early as the first episode.
Which is, what it is Castlevania was never known for doing the violence, but it was known for gory, violent set pieces. Slowly but surely, as we went on in Castlevania's history, we got to see, Castlevania 1, there was not a lot of blood and gore.
No.
Limitations of the system, etc. Just design. Symphony of the Night had a giant monster that was a ball of bodies. That's horrifying. What was it? Curse of Darkness, I think, had a giant monster that was in tears levels, not crying. And it was like flesh exposed, and you had to attack the fleshy parts to it. It's not violence as in you're seeing a bunch of townspeople ripped apart, but the set pieces themselves were meant to be unsettling. it's not enough in animation. It's not enough to just have unsettling set pieces. The violence just seemed, if you're gonna do a backstory, you need to know how the violent set pieces got there.
It's in Castlevania 1, I think stage 5, when you're going through Death's Chambers, you get these skeletons that are hanging off from chains and like with tattered clothes. At one point those skeletons were probably human bodies.
They were living bodies that were left there to die, and then they rotted, and it's gross
and
imagery.
Here's how it happened.
Yeah, and this is where we get. I joke. I watch Game of Thrones and Walking Dead, and whenever I talk to people about them who are not familiar with them, I always tell them the same exact thing about those two shows. That it's violent, but the violence is necessary.
Yeah.
Because if they pull the violence out, the rest of the set would not be believable.
You need a reason to fear Dracula and his minions, especially his minions.
You need to understand why these people are afraid. And when you have an episode that opens up with a bunch of demons and one of them is carrying a baby, and I'm sorry, not carrying a baby, he's got it in his mouth. It's horrifying, but it's supposed to be horrifying because you are supposed to understand that when these people are afraid of the night, this is what they're afraid of. So it makes sense that all of that violence and horrible scenery is there. Like, so I can't imagine if you're upset by that kind of imagery, don't watch the show.
You should probably go watch
bother.
some other things at the studios.
Yeah,
because this is a joint collaboration between a couple of studios. The first two that it popped up in the search was Frederator Studios, who worked on, I believe, they worked on Adventure Time. I never watched Adventure Time.
Adventure Time is, I watched a little bit. I watched some of the later stuff, and it got to a point where it was a little more put together, a little more organized.
As a joint effort between all of those studios, I mean, I think the series looks great when it's in action, but through all the slowdown and then the talking bits, I think it needed a lot of work.
This is a nice start. And if they treat
Yes.
it like a nice start, I'm happy. If this is what the end result is going to look like, I'm less than impressed.
What did you think of like the voice performances? Did you know anybody that were voicing the characters?
I was familiar with Richard Armitage, who did Trevor, which I was very happy with his performance. I am very familiar with James Callis, who did Alucard. He was, if you're a Battlestar Galactica fan, Gaius Baltar. That's who the voice is. Other than that, I mean, Graham McTavish.
Well, I'm glad you at least got two, because I don't know any of these people.
Oh yeah. I Graham McTavish, I think I've heard from before, and I'm not entirely sure. Like, he was Dracula's voice, and I felt like his voice was familiar to me. Tony Amendola was the Elder. Again, he's one of those voices that I've seen the name, and I know I've heard the voice, but for the life of me, I can't place it.
We all got
Other
those.
than that, I have no idea. I like what is her name? Alejandra Reynoso was Sypha, which I loved her voice, but I'm not familiar with the voice actress. And everything else is, everybody else was just, I mean, beyond that and like the Bishop and Lisa, everybody else is additional voice.
Yeah, the extras.
Yeah.
To get paid for a couple of things and they get a free bagel. I thought the voice performances were pretty good for the most part. Again, I think it helps, though, if the animation follows suit. Because there were performances like, if I close my eyes, I'm seeing something different than what I'm seeing on screen.
I'm not a studio guy, so nobody attack me if I misspeak or if I get my concepts wrong. I thought the voice acting was great. I thought that the voices fit the characters. I thought everything was perfect there. I feel like the voice directing was a little off. Something about the way that the characters interacted with each other, I didn't really buy it, especially when you had the Bishop, I believe it was, talking to Alucard. Not to Alucard, to Trevor. I know a lot of the time voice actors will record their lines separately, and then all of that stuff gets sent to wherever, and then they do all of the work. They put everything together from there. I felt like that was blatantly obvious.
Yeah, like they weren't in the same room together, so they couldn't play each other off.
Exactly. If they were able to play off each other from inside a room, I feel like there would have been a more coherent speeches. And I feel like we didn't get that. I feel, and again, the voice actors all did their jobs perfectly, but the way everything was pieced together just seemed a little weird. You know, when you get pauses in between talking that last a little too long and stuff like that, that's when you start to, it takes you out of the conversation because people don't interact that way. And that was what I would do. Other than that, the voices were perfect.
Yeah, I thought I thought everybody did their part really well. And I mean, hell, I got no reference to pull from for the NES game. I don't think there was voice acting in that day. Just call it a hunch.
No, oh god, unless one of those characters said "Blades of Steel" or "Double Dribble," there was no voice acting.
There were a lot of cues taken from the series that I was happy to see. I mean, I first watched the series after only like getting 2 hours of sleep, and I had a smile on my face for a couple of things that they did, and I was happy about that. But to me, my biggest sticking point throughout the 4 episodes was something I was hoping they would do at least once, and they don't do it at all. It's the soundtrack.
Oh, the music was lacking.
I was waiting because again, this series is based off of Dracula's Curse, and that's NES Castlevania. And what is one thing NES Castlevania is known for? But its soundtrack. And I get it that it'd be too video gamey, I guess. But this this series already has a Cyclops with a laser coming out of its fucking eye.
Well, that's the thing. It will be one that would be an argument for if this came out in what 89 when Castlevania 3 actually came out.
Yeah.
But we're in a generation where there has been plenty of orchestrated versions of Castlevania music. There is plenty of basis for the idea of remixed music placed over some of these battle scenes, and it's not like you don't have a large pool to grab these songs from.
Yeah, especially Castlevania 3.
Yeah, Castlevania 3 on its own had good music, but I don't think anybody's gonna fight you if in the middle of a battle you start playing music from Rondo of Blood. No one's gonna sit there and watch the show and say, "Oh, well, that's from Rondo of Blood. That wasn't around when Castlevania 3 was around." Unlike no one's going to do that. Anybody who's a fan of Castlevania music wants to hear Castlevania music, and they're going to take it wherever they can get it.
This series definitely needed some sort of... I mean, if they were remixes I didn't recognize. So I'm just going to assume that, no, they didn't
who knows? For all we know, maybe we're totally wrong, and there were some Kid Dracula songs in there that we just didn't remember.
Yeah, Kid Dracula. There's some deep cuts. It needed something from its series. I mean, because, come on, man, Castlevania, that's one of its defining aspects, is its music. You can't... I mean, everybody knows Vampire Killer. Everybody knows Beginning.
Yeah.
We
know Vampire Killer. Bloody Tears.
Yeah.
If you were gonna use those songs in the say if you just wanted to use them in the intro and the out credits, no one's gonna argue.
No one's
gonna complain. No, could you imagine at the beginning of every episode you get a brand new version of Vampire Killer or Bloody Tears?
And that's continue harping on that, but I thought the music direction from what we got was lacking in a lot of ways. If it was too generic, it was also misplaced as hell. And again, I go back to that goddamn bar scene.
The bar scene, yeah.
When he's having that bar fight with those two patrons, what is this music I'm listening to? Is this supposed to be upbeat? Is it supposed to be?
I think it was.
I didn't think you. I know. Here's the thing. I didn't get that it was a joke until they kept kicking him in the dick.
Yeah. Could you please stop kicking me in the testicles?
Leave
my testicles alone.
Yeah. At that point, it's oh, it's supposed to be funny because they go about talking about the Belmonts are responsible for this, and he sees the crest on it, and it's he's drunk, obviously, but they're playing this pretty seriously, and then the music starts playing. He's like, wait, what is this music?
And you know what? When the music first started, I took the cue that, okay, this is supposed to be a funny scene. And we have Trevor Belmont, the vampire killer, the monster hunter extraordinaire, and we're about to get a comical scene because realistically he should outclass them.
Yeah, but he's drunk.
Because I think it was 4-1. He should outclass them. No question whatsoever. So when the funny music started, I got the impression that, okay, we're about to get a great scene where he's just doing all kinds of goofy things and beating the crap out of them. But then they were kicking his ass. In the midst of this moment where I'm supposed to think from the music that it's a funny scene, he's actually getting the crap kicked out of him. And I'm thinking, so it's not a funny scene? I'm a little confused as to what's going on. Like, how serious am I supposed to be taking this? Am I supposed to think this is a joke? Or am I worried for him? Like, obviously, he's not going to get killed in the first,
it'll be a very
second
quick
episode.
series.
But, is what's going on here that, like, what am I supposed to be feeling? Because that's what music is for. Music is helps drive your emotion. Any of the greatest games out there have music that drive your emotions. When it's tense, you feel it in the music. When it's lighthearted, you feel it in the music.
I agree.
And Castlevania is known for that. So when you take that out of it, I'm almost confused. Imagine a Metroid game, one of the series with the most atmospheric music ever, and when you enter a deep dark cave and you know that there's a boss coming, someone starts playing a xylophone. I'd be really, really confused.
It's funny you mentioned Metroid because there have been interviews. Warren Ellis says if he was given the approval, he would make a Metroid Netflix series.
And you know what? Jumping ahead to a final overview, if this is Castlevania, I don't think I want them to handle Metroid. Only because I love that series so much. And why don't you know what? When it comes to Metroid, why don't you leave its testicles alone? Her testicles.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. If Warren Ellis were to make something Metroid related, I'd watch it. I
mean, let's be realistic here. For love or hate Castlevania, we're gonna keep watching when the next 4 episodes come up next year.
Yeah, because I enjoyed what I watched. It's just that I thought it wasn't perfect. It wasn't. Oh my God! This is the end all be all Castlevania thing. Because no, I thought it had a number of problems that I hope I reflected well enough in this video. But I still enjoyed my time. Honestly, I'm just happy to see Castlevania back in some form or fashion after what I thought was the death of the franchise years ago, with Konami just throwing it off the face of the earth.
Yeah, but I'm never going to be happy for scraps because I was starved. And granted, this is more than speaking of Grant. This is more than scrap. Yeah, because we didn't get over. There were some people complaining that Grant, who was the third playable character in Dracula's Curse, which was Castlevania 3, there were some people complaining that he wasn't there. But in that game, you actually don't meet him until later on in the game, so it makes sense that he's not here yet.
Well, I mean, they're taking liberties, obviously, because if we're going to be really technical, Grant's supposed to be the first person you meet. If no matter what, because you run into the clock tower, you could run into the clock tower first.
That's right. Yeah, since you had to go up there and you had to meet him. But let's face it, once you got past the clock tower, you switched. Sorry, Grant, but you stay here, Grant. You wait here.
I like Grant.
We'll be back for you.
He can climb ceilings, and he had control in midair.
Give me Alucard any day. Although Sypha was
ridiculous.
She was a little bit broken in that game. She was a little bit broken in that game. No offense to her being a stone statue, but she was broken. Overall, the show was good. I have seen shows that 4 episodes in I've never watched again. This is a show that 4 episodes in, I know for a fact I am going to watch the rest of the show. If the show continues on like this, I will at least continue on and watch the series at least once. If it gets better, I'll watch it over and over again, starting from episode 5.
Again, I enjoyed what I saw. It's just not perfect, but I am happy to see something come out of this, and I'll gladly look forward to season 2, and hopefully make it a little longer than 4 episodes this time.
You know what? A lot of shows are doing that nowadays, though. You're getting 4 or 6 episode quote unquote season 1s, and rather than call the next batch season 1.5 or whatever, they're just going ahead and calling it season 2.
Yeah, and I know animation takes way longer than, say, maybe a season of Stranger Things or Daredevil, because people have to painstakingly create this hand by hand. I'm glad that the animation in its entirety is can even get a resurgence in something like Netflix. It's great.
Yeah,
But it's like still, you cannot alter the expectations of what people would expect from a Netflix exclusive series, which in this case is at least at minimum 8 episodes.
Yeah, 8 to 10 episodes is pretty normal for Netflix.
So if it's got to take a little longer to get out for the sake of having more episodes, I'd rather have something that, that's been meticulously crafted over something that's rushed just to meet the expectations of a seasonal show. Don't do that. Take your time with it. Crank out more episodes so that we have something to watch that lasts longer than a 2-hour film.
And it's interesting because I don't remember when exactly they announced the show, but when they announced the release date, I remember thinking, that's kind of super fast. For it to be an animated show, which generally takes a lot longer, that's kind of quick. And now I understand why it was quick. It was because we only got 4 episodes.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a little bit, I understand that a little bit more. And it's classic Netflix fashion, but it just kind of, it hurts it that it all came out at one shot. So you binged it in 2 hours as opposed to, 1 episode a week, which,
Well, it's kind of a Dan if you do, Dan if you don't. Because if it was a weekly series,
Yeah.
people would be pissed that it's only 4 episodes long.
We'd be upset that every other show was put up all at once, and in this one they were staggering, and then we would say, oh, it's because they only have 4 episodes, they're dragging it on.
Yeah. If you haven't watched it yet at this point, well, I'm sorry to ruin it for you, but hey, that's your fault at this point.
I'll tell you, no, you know what? I'll tell you what. There is a fight that we didn't talk about, and I won't talk about it so that you'll be pleasantly surprised, because it was actually my favorite fight in the series. Episode 3.
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about.
Okay, we
All
didn't
right.
talk about that fight. I feel like there were some important points in there, but we didn't talk about it. So if you haven't watched the show yet, go ahead and watch it. It hasn't been spoiled for you yet.
Yeah. So you got something to look forward to.
Yeah, and I definitely, and that's a good point though. Support the show,
Yes.
because if you hated it, you hated it. That's fine. If you loved it, you loved it. If you thought it was just okay, still support it, because we'll get more of it and
Yeah.
it'll get better.
And it has a chance to grow and improve. Exactly.
I'd love to turn this into a situation where where they end this story arc and then we get another animated series about a different story arc.
Right.
Maybe some Castlevania games that we're not as familiar with.
Give me the 1999 game. Like, give me the Julius Belmont story, the one that permanently killed Dracula, the one that sealed him inside the solar eclipse. We can do it. We're back in this.
Were there any Castlevania games on a CDI that we can work with?
You know what I like to see? The Castlevania Legends. Make that an animated series. I want to
Yeah.
see I want to see the original origins. I'm talking about before Lament of Innocence was even a thing. I want to see the original origins of the Belmont clan with Sonia, right? I believe that was her name.
That was Sonya before that was before the vampire killer though, right?
Well, that's what I'm getting at. Like, Lament of Innocence is technically the origins of the Belmont versus Dracula storyline.
Of the whip, of the vampire
killer whip. Yeah. But I believe that was after Legends was retconned, and it's not part of that official timeline anymore. It's still not. But I would love to see an animated series off Legends. I'd be totally down with that.
You know what? Give me a Bloodline show and tell me why I'm supposed to care about John Morris. Because let's face it, when you play that game, you picked Eric Lecard, and that was the game.
Yeah. Well, either way, I hope you guys enjoyed our little. I'm not even sure how long this thing's gone on.
This is half the show.
Yeah.
This has been 2 episodes of the show.
Well, you can watch it side by side. Maybe some sort of commentary track. I doubt it, though. Probably wouldn't line close.
No, it's not going to line up very easily.
No.
Well, you'll just have to keep clicking this episode and listen for the parts that matter.
I want to thank, again, my Uncle Greg for joining me today for a discussion. I honestly, I did miss doing these. I just don't have as much time as I'd like to between this and SGB and Brain Scratch duties. And I find these so relaxing to do, especially when I got someone to bounce off of. That's why I don't like doing them alone. And Uncle, thanks again for joining me. Where can people find you at if they want to listen to your discussions? And because you talk about a few things on your channel.
Yeah, I actually do. I did a video recently about. I actually did one a little while ago, just about glitches in video games and whether or not they should be considered in reviews. I did one the other day, and for the life of me, I can't. You know what it is? I do these reviews, or not reviews. I do discussions basically, and then they go up, and then I just kind of forget them. And then every once in a while I get a comment about an old video, and I think, oh yeah, I talked about that. But I did one about what's causing the rise in retro video game prices. You know, a lot of people are complaining that YouTubers are inflating the price, whether on purpose or by accident. So I did a discussion about that, but I do a few discussions here and there. I do some sort of inspirational stuff, just, you know, being who you are. And I do a couple of Let's Plays, but the Let's Plays they're almost like filler at this point.
Yeah, you're more about discussions and talking. Where can they find you at?
Yeah, well, I'm going to be on YouTube at Uncle Silver Gaming. So that's still YouTube, you know, /C Uncle Silver Gaming. I'm also on Twitter at SilverGreg78. I have a Facebook page, but don't worry about it. It's just my Twitter page repeated on the Facebook.
Okay.
And one day I'll have an Instagram, and I'm thinking about 51 days from now, I'm going to start a SoundCloud. So,
sound business investment, my friend.
That's a good. I have a lot invested in SoundCloud futures.
They were really cheap stock.
Yeah, I must have got in at the right time.
Yeah, I'm a genius. Well, that'll wrap it up for today's discussion, folks. I hope you guys tuned in and listened. Hope you have a good time. If you guys want to see more of this, I mean, you know how to show your appreciation. I'm not going to tell you exactly how. You guys all know how that works. Mm-hmm. Unlike, unsubscribe, and don't leave a comment.
Double click dislike.
Yeah. Unsubscribe and hit the cancel button on notification bell. In fact, shoot the bell.
Absolutely.
You guys all enjoy the rest of your nights. Thank you for listening in. You take care now.